we will begin the virtual tour of the celestial sphere. So right now you have the view of the sky right now. I have given the location as Mangalore where I live. So you have the sun up in the sky and there's nothing very interesting. Sun is right there and nothing else. But what if it is night? But before I take you to the night, I want to show you how the eclipse look like. So I would like to show it to you. So I'll just center the sun right now. And let's zoom into the sun. You can see the sun as a beautiful disk. In fact, this is how the sun would look if you're looking at it using a solar filter. Now, let's change the date here to 21st June. Oh yeah, there's the moon. The moon has come in between. So let me just go back in time at 9:43. I don't know if you can see it. You can see a very faint moon over here, which is nothing but the moon, but there's no light from the sun falling on it. So you can't see it. As time proceeds, I can just go forward in time, or let me do it automatically. Yes, so exactly at 10:04, the moon has made contact and you can see the moon coming into the view of the sun, or it's obstructing the sun. Astronomically, we call this an occultation or a transit, depending on how we can see the object behind. So we will see in a while. This is the view from Udupi or Mangalore, as you will see it on 21st. The moon is coming in between. And yeah, I'm just fast forwarding time. You can see how this time is running at the bottom here. And that's how the moon goes around the sun. Very fascinating. The reason I'm doing this is because this is the monsoon time and the clouds can easily make us miss this beautiful phenomena. So that's how the eclipse occurs. At 1:30 we are done with the eclipse. But the beauty of this eclipse is at Dehradun on 21st, this is the sight you will see. Let me just forward the time for you. Where's the moon? Moon is approaching. Oh yeah, here's the moon. I don't know if you can follow it. Here's the moon coming slowly. This is the disk of the moon, disk of the sun. Sun is waiting to be eclipsed. And there it is, yes. So watch out how the moon is different from Udupi and Dehradun that day. And at the moment of peak eclipse, there it is. And yeah, so you can see the moon cannot completely cover the sun. So this would be a transit. I'll explain what a transit is later. So from Dehradun, if you see on that day, the eclipse will look so beautiful. If you go to a place called Joshimath in Uttarakhand or the Himalayas perhaps, or Tibet on that day, you will see this ring complete, where this moon will be covering 98% of the sun and you'll have an annual eclipse. But I will come back to Mangalore because I'm more familiar with the skies here. So let's come back to Mangalore on the eclipse day. Yes. So this is how the eclipse will occur. So coming back to today morning, this is the sun right now. Moon is nowhere near you. I'll zoom out and we have the beautiful view. Let me just shift the view and yes. So this, you have the north on the top, south, east and west. So you can see the view, entire view right now. I will just move to 7:47 tonight. Can you see the stars? I hope you can. Even if I make it 8:47, very hardly you can see any stars. This is my case. For people like me in Mangalore, the night sky is not very great because of something called light pollution. So let me show what people of Mangalore and Udupi and all the people living in cities are missing. So let me just reduce the light pollution here. And there it is. If there's no light pollution at all, the night sky will look this beautiful. We can see some star names. We can see a lot of stars over there. You can see a patch over here, which is called the Milky Way galaxy. I don't know if you've heard of it. Tonight at 8:48, Jupiter is on the horizon. You have Arcturus here. In India, we call it as Swathi Nakshatra. The Spica, we call it Chaitra. Vega, which is Abhijit. So these are all the stars. Now this is the night sky. Now what I'll do is, I will just move forward from June here to November. And you'll see none of the stars that I showed you right now are here. Okay, Rigel is here. There's Deneb, there's Vega. Vega has moved from this point to this point. Whereas any other stars, they aren't there. They have moved. So this is what I was talking about the night sky. We are limited when we are looking at the sky by time. But using the software, what I can show you is, I can show you the entire celestial sphere by removing any obstructions. So let me just remove the atmosphere Okay, this is how the sky would look if there was no atmosphere and light pollution at night. And just let me remove the ground, and this is your sky. So this is a virtual thing, because if there was a ground, you couldn't see below the ground. So if you look down, this is how you would see. You would see the ground, nothing else. But if I can remove this ground, I can see what's below the ground here. So you can see the time right now. Let me show it to you again. It is 19, that is today, June, sorry, it's November. Okay, let me set it to June. Yeah. So June 19th, today night. This black patch you see is the ground. So all the stars behind it will not be visible at night. Obviously the sun has to be behind it because it is night. And when I remove it, you can see all the stars. Now what you're doing is, technically you're not on Earth, you are in the place of Earth and you're floating in space, and you can look in all directions. So let me just show it to you. I've switched to azimuth altitude view. Okay. Now look at your sky. Look around you. Everywhere you see the stars. Up, down, right, left. Everywhere there is stars. You can see the Milky Way, which pretty much covers the whole sky, but there's a darker region because that is the center of the Milky Way, which we can see from Earth. We have stars spread around the skies, and if I zoom in, you can see some patterns here and there. This is what we call constellations. Let me find some familiar constellations for you. Here it is. So azimuth altitude, yeah. I hope everyone recognizes this. I hope everyone recognizes these three lines in the sky. We call it Orion's belt. So the stars you see here, there's Betelgeuse, there's Bellatrix, there's Rigel, and there's Ceph. You have the Orion's belt, the Orion's sword. If you can see here, you have Orion looks like he's holding a bow. And then somewhere here, because of the sun, we have some obstruction. Otherwise, he's holding an arrow or a club. This is how the ancients saw the night sky. They saw shapes in the sky. And these shapes today, we basically, we can like connect these shapes. And when we do that, we will kind of identify these constellations. We can even give them an image. If I do an image, this is how the constellations will look like. Okay, there's the image. Yes. So this is how Orion looks. Some imagine him holding a bow. Some of them are imagining him holding a lion or a prey that he has just hunted. That's why it's Orion the hunter, obviously. But what's beautiful about this is, just behind the hunter, there's always a dog. So I'll just remove the image so that you can see it yourself. Sirius, the brightest star other than the sun in the night sky. He's always following Orion. No matter where Orion goes, there's Sirius. Next to Sirius, or Canis Major, the constellation it is called, you can see the name is here. Next to him, you have something called the Lepus, which is nothing but a rabbit, if you imagine it. What else is in the night sky? You have two stick figures. We all have drawn stick figures in our notebooks. There's a stick figure in the night sky. One, you can see the prominent stars, Castor up here and Pollux. This is the Gemini constellation. So Castor and Pollux were two brothers in the Greek mythology. You have Cancer, which doesn't give you the picture right now. You have Leo, which is a beautiful lion sitting up in the night sky. You can imagine it as a lion sitting up or just standing. But you can see the torso of the lion very visible, prominently visible. So some of these constellations are quite easy to imagine without the lines. For example, if you look towards the north in the night sky, unless you are at the equator and you are above the equator, if you look at the north, not the southern hemisphere people, you can see a pan-shaped object here. So this pan-shaped star formation, we call it Ursa Major, or in India we call it the Saptarishi. But before that, I'll just explain you some basic terms about astronomy and how we look at the sky, because I can't randomly move around and show you stars. You should know how to actually look at stars. So a few things I want to show you. First, whenever we have a telescope or whenever we try to locate stuff in the night sky from the Earth point of view, the ground. Let me just put back the sky. Okay. I will draw the directions. Yes. So on Earth, there are two ways to actually look at the night sky and locate the stars. First is called the azimuth altitude system. So azimuth altitude system is where I look at the north at my horizon, and that is 0, 0. That's my origin. And from the north, if I go around 360 degrees, this is 90, 180, 270, 360, we are back to the north. So we have a circle of 360 degrees we can cover, and I can go up from 0 degree, 10, 20, 30, 40, up to 90 degrees up in the sky, and then I can basically go down on the other side as well. So this is the alt azimuth system. In this system, if I'm supposed to locate Vega, which is visible right now, okay, so Vega, if I want to visible, let me just put a grid for you to understand easily. Yes. So if I want to look at Vega, what will I do? I will basically look from 0 in the north, I will look towards 52 degrees, which comes up to here. This is 52 degrees, this is 50 degrees, 52 degrees. I'm here right now. Let me center that. From 52 degrees, the horizontal angle, I will go up a vertical angle of 27 degrees. You can see the data is on the top left, but I don't think it's visible. So yeah, so 52 degrees from the north and then 27 degrees up, you have found Vega. If you want to look at Jupiter, given the time, tonight at 8:55, as the time is over here, lower right corner, Jupiter is located at, let me take a guess, Jupiter is somewhere at 112 degrees over here, and a little bit, you can see this angle is very small, so the altitude of Jupiter is 2 degrees, from 0 at the horizon to 2 degrees. So this is how you use the alt azimuth system to locate any object in the night sky. This is a good system for amateur astronomers. This is a good system for telescopes that work on alt azimuth system. But if you want to observe the objects, there's a problem. Let me just locate the moon and I'll show you what the problem is. Let me move forward in time. Yes, there's the moon at 3 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock. Yes, okay. So the moon is over here on 15th June. You can see the time, 15th June at 1:56 in the morning. The moon is over here. Now what I'll do is, I will show how the moon looks on a telescope that works on the alt azimuth system. So let me just go forward in time. Yes, so this is how the moon looks. I'll remove the grid for you. Now, if I move forward, this is the moon at 2 o'clock in the morning on the 15th of June, which is in the past. If I look at the moon from the telescope at 3 o'clock, you can see the moon is like this, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. You can see the moon is slowly rotating. As daylight comes, it is a different thing. What I'll do is, I'll go to your full moon phase. Yes. So during a full moon phase, let me show you how this moon works. The moon is out around 6 in the evening, 7. Yes. So let me just zoom in. This is how the moon looks on 6th June at night at 8 o'clock. And if I move forward, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see how the moon is rotating. This is because the earth is rotating, the views keep changing, and if you are a photographer, you will know taking the photo is not just like clicking a button and you get a photo. When it comes to astronomy photos, you have to take photos for hours, and you know how things get blurry if they move, so you can't get any details. So we have another system in astronomy where we talk about the equatorial system. So the equatorial system is basically, we take the celestial equator. I can draw it for you. Do we have the celestial equator? Yes. The celestial equator is here. Yes. So the Earth's equator, if I extend it to meet the celestial sphere, it would be a plane on this line. This is the equator right now. Let me just switch the view. Okay. So this is the equator. Now the equatorial system works in a similar fashion, but on a different coordinate system, where on the alt-azimuth system your 0, 0 depended on where you were. The equatorial system depends on the equator or the position. So here it is. So the equatorial system works on the point where the ecliptic meets the equator. So you can see an orange line that is the ecliptic and the blue line that is the equator. They meet at this point here. If I zoom in, you can see it's a system like this. This point is my 0, 0. Now you can be very sure in the sky the equator and the ecliptic are quite always like this, and this point gives this is the origin. So anything I want to locate will be from this point. So for that I have a grid for you. Yes. So you can see this is the 0, 0. I hope all of you know how to plot a graph. Now if I want to locate Jupiter on this equatorial system, I am not referring to the ground, I am referring to a point in sky which is always a constant. So on this you will find Jupiter is at, so my coordinate system now is Rs. Just to give you an idea, Jupiter is located at 19 hours. This is the 19-hour line, this is the 20-hour line, so in between 19 hours and 20 hours. So this is my horizontal axis, and vertically I can go up like this. This is called declination. So you have equatorial axis where you have the right ascension, we call it the horizontal axis, and declination. So declination can be positive or negative. So Jupiter, let me just show you the numbers. Yes, Jupiter is at 19 hours 53 minutes. So 19 hours and then 1 hour to reach here. So in between 53 minutes. 19 hours, 19 hours 30 minutes, 19 hours 45 minutes, 19 hours 53 minutes. So from this point it is located here in the horizontal axis. Vertically, this angle I told you, this is the 0 line. Jupiter is below it, so it has to be negative. It is negative 21 degrees. Now the advantage of this system, again I'll go to the moon. Let me just go back. Yes. You can see if I look at the moon, as the night passes, I'm going back in time actually. Yes. So on 5th June, I'll show you the moon at 8:05 in the night, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2, 3. You can see the moon is fixed. So for astrophotographers, equatorial system is the system. So based on these two systems, we can locate any star systems. So just stopping the basic idea of coordinates, let me just get deeper into stars. Now you know this, the sky always is stable and the earth moves around. So if I move forward in time, you'll see the sky is stable in the equatorial system and the earth is moving around. This is backward in time, this is forward in time. Each day, because of the earth's rotation around the earth, around the sun as well as its own axis, all stars rise 4 minutes early than the previous day. Yeah, here we have Vega on 6th June at 4 in the morning. On 7th June, you'll see Vega has moved a little. That's like 4 minutes away. Next 8th June, 9th June. So you see the sky is slowly moving. And this is the reason why I said, if you look at the sky in July, it's a different system. Vega has moved much to the towards the west. If I go around, you'll see the star keeps changing. So virtually, how do I get hold of this system? Because of this rotation of the earth, what we can do is, we can always look at something called the pole star. How do I look at the pole star? Let me remove the ecliptic and the equator. Let me remove the hints. Okay, how do I locate the pole star? So always, I told you Ursa Major is this asterism here. This Big Dipper is the asterism inside Ursa Major, the constellation. So if you know where the Big Dipper is, what you can do is the first two stars of the Big Dipper, if you extend it forward, you will get something called Polaris. Polaris is the star that is exactly above the Earth's north pole, which means in the night sky, when the stars rotate, you will see they all go around Polaris. So let me just remove the atmosphere so there is no day and night. I will just show you the stars here. Let's focus on Polaris. You see, you observe Vega and Deneb on the sky. As I move in time, they are all rotating around Polaris. Everybody is going around Polaris. You can see more stars now, they are all going around Polaris. So this is an important object in the night sky. In fact, navigators, before there was GPS and advanced compasses, whenever you had colonialists moving, finding out discovering different countries, they would look at Polaris. So I'll come back to today, tonight at 7. Okay, so this is Polaris. Now, locating Polaris is easy, right? You can just find the Big Dipper. But what if this is not June? What if this is somewhere in November? If you go out in the November sky, you will not be able to locate Big Dipper because it's below the horizon. At Mangalore, of course, it will vary from place to place. How would you locate something? How would you locate the Polaris? What you would do is you would look for an M in the sky. I'll just enable it for a while and then remove it. Did you see the M in the sky? You can see a star here, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. This star forms an M or a W, depends on how you see it. So this is called Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is another constellation you use to locate Polaris. So you take the Cassiopeia's stars, let me just enable the lines for you to make it easy. So you have Cassiopeia's lines like this. So the first angle of the M between those two stars, somewhere if you extend, you will find Polaris as a bright star. So once you found Polaris, locating stuff is easy. Now in Indian system, Polaris is called Dhruva. Dhruva was a devotee of God who was very hard to move when he was doing his meditation. So star that does not move from its place is called Dhruva. Saptarishi is not visible here because it's below the horizon. Now moving on to these stars, I said Dhruva, I said Saptarishi. So ancient Indians have given names to stars. Why? Obviously it's easy to identify, but in the ancient system, not just Indian, around the world, you could look at constellations in the night sky, and our ancestors realized that as months pass, the constellations move. And because the constellations move, it's easy that if I can locate a star in the sky and its position and find what day is it. But how would you do that? So if this is your night sky, how would you locate which day is it? Let me just make it easy for you. Coming back to tonight's sky. So at 8, 9 tonight, to give you a sense of it, I will move back to a month and then a few days. Yes. Now you'll realize that the moon moves towards these stars. You will see the moon moves towards these stars, and he has gone now. This is towards the new moon nights at 8 o'clock. Okay, every night at 8 o'clock, the moon moves, and every single time he will appear between this line. See, there's Spica, there's Regulus, Pollux, Capella. So moon will move between them always. If I go past on 8th April 2020, moon was here. 7th April, he was a little behind. 6th April, 5th April, 4th April, 3rd April, 2nd April. So you have the moon moving across the sky between fixed stars. So our ancestors decided this is a good system to identify the day. So the moon, if you notice, Let me remove the ground to make it easy for you. If you notice, the moon, okay, let's start from, where will we start? Okay, let's start from Aldebaran over here. Yes, so on 29th March, the moon is near Aldebaran. Next, a few days later, okay, let me just zoom in to make it easy for you. Okay, yes, see on 29, the moon is close to Aldebaran, or we call it Rohini. On 30th, the moon would be close to Margashira, which is the head of Orion, as you see here, which we call, we say falls under the Taurus Rashi. Notice that I'm not calling it a constellation yet. On 30th, 31st, the moon has moved away from Mrigashira, or the head of the Orion, and closer to Ardra. Same in line basically, same in line. So Betelgeuse here is Ardra. If I move further in time, the moon has come closer to Castor and Pollux, or we call it Punarvasu. So same way, the moon keeps moving every night at the same time across the sky, right? And this is not just days, even hours. Right now you can see the moon next to Spica. If I move at 9 o'clock, the moon will move further, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So you see the moon keeps moving. And every day at a particular time, let me call it midnight, let's remove all confusions. At midnight on 9th April, the moon is next to Spica, or Swati, Spica is Chaitra Nakshatra, Chitra Nakshatra we call it. Next day, the moon has moved forward, okay, on this day, yeah, next day, the moon has moved closer to Antares, Jyeshta Nakshatra. I'm not saying exactly this is that nakshatra, but this is how you identify the time. You can verify this. You can find the name of the stars and the modern names on Wikipedia. You can install Stellarium and do this yourself. And you'll see all the planets also move along the same line. In fact, let me make it easy for you. I will draw something called an ecliptic. Yes. So you'll see all the planets, the moon, and where's the hero, the sun. They all move along the same line. So at midnight on 17th April, sun is here. 18th, 19th, 20th. So basically this line that you see is called the ecliptic. It is the plane on which the earth goes around the sun. Or to imagine, if you know that the earth goes around the sun, if you were an earth and there was a sun that you were going around, you would need to walk on a surface. So ecliptic is that surface, imaginary surface on which the earth goes around the sun. And to our luck, all the planets, you see Mercury, Venus, Earth you can't see because you are on it. Mars is over here, Moon is over here. If I move further, you will find Saturn and Jupiter over here. They are all on the same line, they are very close to this line. So this is how, basically this is the part that astrology uses, the part of astronomy that astrology uses for the predictions. In terms of astronomy, this is called the ecliptic. And you will find the 27 nakshatras in the Indian system all lying close to this ecliptic. So this is how our ancients used to find time. Now, once we are done understanding days, we will go back to the day because we need to identify the year as well, right? So let me bring back the ground, the sky, and we are close to June 21st, so we will upside down, yes. Okay, let me just set it for a while. Okay, yes. So what I'll do is, I'll go closer, I will set it around, and let me remove the ecliptic. I will put the alt azimuth grid. Fine. So your east to west line is here. Or let me just remove this grid. What I'll do is I'll draw the equator. Yes, better. So equator is here. Now, how do you identify the parts of the year by just being on Earth? Because all of you have been shown in school how the season system changes. You know how June, September, March can be identified based on the position of the Earth and all that. But can you actually imagine that from Earth? It's quite easy, but you would have to make a lot of observations. What I'll do is, I will move the days. So this is the sun's position today at 12 in the afternoon. Now, this is 19th June. Observe the sun clearly. If you want, I'll help you with the grid so that you can identify. Yes, this grid is better. So you can notice how the sun is located at some height from the equator. I will move to 20th, 21st. There's an eclipse happening, so you see a drop in brightness. I will move further, and I'll do it very fast. I'll do it very fast, and we are running at days in a matter of milliseconds here. It's already the end of August. You see the sun is coming down and to the equator. This happens every year on 21st September. There's a name for this. It's an equinox. It's the point in the year of where the day and night are the same length. Moving further from September, if you notice, the sun goes below the equator and then stops around the date of December 21st, 22nd usually. And then if I move around every single day, if I make an observation of the sun at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you will see the sun keeps moving back again. And after December, on March 21st, 22nd, the sun is again at the equator, again an equinox. We call it the vernal and the autumnal equinox. And again the sun goes around, goes up, reaches a point in the sky every day at 12 o'clock. He will reach a point up until June 21st. And then he decides it's too much, I'll go down again. So this varies from place to place on Earth, but you will notice that if you go out every single day at 12 o'clock and note down the coordinates of the sun, throughout the year if you mark this on a paper, then you will find the sun will make an 8-shaped path throughout the year. So based on this, we can tell the part of the year. Why? Because on when the sun reaches the maximum north at a given place, you know it's peak summer. In India we have monsoons during that time, but it's called the summer solstice. This is the maximum the sun will go up to the north from the place I have located. You can change the place and verify. And then if I move, the sun comes down on September, the sun is exactly in the middle of the sky. Further down, on December, the sun reaches the southernmost. And you know, if you pay a close attention to the orbit of the Earth, you'll know this is the time when we have the longest nights, winter. So when the sun is towards the south at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, you know it's winter or December. From winter, if the sun comes to middle of the sky, you know it's March. And then you have June when the sun goes up, you know it is summer. Another way to note this is, this quite looks not very possible given the daylight, but the sun also, if I remove this, let me remove the grid for you and let me enable the constellation images, that's easier. And now you will notice the sun is in the constellation we called Cancer here. So I'll come back to today. Today the sun is exiting Taurus and it has closely reached to Gemini. Next month on 19th of July, the sun will be, okay, let's make it first, that will be an easier idea. Yes. So on 1st of July, the sun is in Gemini. On 1st of August, the sun is in Cancer. And then you have Leo. So you know, these are all different parts of the sky that the sun follows. And this is how you identify the parts of the year. This is our ancient ancestors actually identified the year, the part of the year we are in. When you have Scorpio, so the sun always moves in these constellations which are 12 in number. Not a coincidence that we have 12 months, it's basically designed this way. So every month the sun is in one constellation. That's why we have a 12 months of a calendar. So this is how constellations, the night sky, the stars, the planets are used to identify time. That is how solstice works and equinox works. Now before I talk more about stars, I want to show you from that time, Saturn, Jupiter have been coming up in the screen, but I'm not addressing them. Before they feel bad, what I'll do is, let's drop the constellation. Okay, so we'll remove the images. Okay. Now what we'll do is we'll focus on planets. Mercury, bringing Mercury to center. I'll zoom into Mercury. And this is how Mercury looks. Let me switch to today. Okay. This is how Mercury would look if you look at it from a telescope right now. You will see Mercury as a crescent planet. Why? Because Mercury is in between the Earth and the Sun. So the Sun is behind Mercury, technically speaking. So you can see a little light, just like the Moon is. You know how the full moon, new moon system works? The same happens for Mercury and Venus as well. So what I'll do is, I'll explain you some concepts. What I'll do is, I will bring the Sun to the center. Let's bring Sun to the center. Notice the position of Mercury. I will move to July. Where's Mercury? Oh, he's here. Next, if I move to August, again Mercury keeps jumping. So I'll do daytime. So if I keep every day, if I locate this, you'll see Mercury goes away from the Sun and then he goes close to the Sun. It's like he keeps missing the Sun, so he'll go back and pay a visit to the Sun. Again, he's missed the Sun, so he comes close. After a few days of being close to the Sun, he gets bored and he goes away. So this is how Mercury works. So whenever Mercury is the farthest from the Sun, we call it an elongation. Whenever Mercury is behind the Sun, we will call it a superior conjunction. And whenever Mercury is in between the Sun and the Earth, we call it an inferior conjunction. So to make the terminologies easier, what I'll show you these. Elongation is quite easy, farthest from the Sun. So better to observe when the Sun sets. You'll see if the ground is covering the Sun over here, you still can see Mercury. It's very far away, so it will set slowly. But what is inferior conjunction? I will set this to 2020 this year on 1st of July. Where is Mercury? It's over here. So let me just zoom in. You can see Mercury is over here, and if I zoom in, oh, there he is. But if I zoom in, you will not see Mercury. Why? Because Mercury is between the Earth, and whatever Sun's light is falling on Mercury, you can't see it. It's between the Earth and the Sun. What happens when Moon does this? When the Moon is in between the Sun and the Earth, when you can't see the Moon, you call it a new Moon. So right now, what you're seeing is new Mercury. If I move to further months, in the month of August 17th, then I can see complete Mercury. Why? Because Mercury is on the other side of the Sun. It's not between the Earth and the Sun. So all of Sun's light falling on Mercury can be seen from Earth. If this was for the Moon, this would be full Moon. So this is, right now what you're seeing is full Mercury. So superior conjunction is when you can see the planet completely. Or for the Moon, we call it full Moon. Inferior is when you can't see it at all. It's a new planet or a new moon. The same can happen with Venus. So let me just find Venus. I'll just go through this a little faster now. Let me not waste your time a lot. There's Venus. Oh, Venus is hard to identify. Let me go today. Sun disappeared, bringing back Sun. Venus is missing. Okay, then I'll have to use the search option. Venus, where are you? There it is. So you see, from the sun's point of view, Venus is this far right now. If I zoom into Venus, this is the beauty. You can go to our website and find a post called Wonders of Venus, given by Dr. A.P. Bhatt, where it talks about the beauty of Venus through a telescope. And tonight, if you can find Venus and you can look at it, by some chance you will be able to locate it, you will see Venus as a beautiful crescent planet, because it is almost in between the Earth and the Sun. In fact, on 6th June, let me show it to you. 6th June, you see Venus disappeared. Why? Because it is in between. You will see the Sun just above or below. Yeah, so Venus was just, from point of view of the Earth, Venus was very close to the Sun, and it's actually in between the Earth and the Sun. So you can't see anything. When I go to Venus, you can't see anything because all the light falling on Venus is being reflected on the other direction. So this is how Venus works and Mercury works. If I move towards every day, you'll see the Venus will be like the moon, a crescent Venus, showing a little bit of the planet every single day. And you'll notice something. Venus is becoming smaller. Probably is dieting and getting smaller. See, it's far off. Why? Because the planets are moving in an elliptical path. Also, you can imagine when the Sun is between Venus and Earth, Venus is the farthest. So the time of the year when you can see Venus completely lit, you will actually see Venus being very, very small. If you just jump a month here, yes. So December month you will see Venus, but you will not see it as big. You see it become smaller. If you look at Venus in February, still there, and then if you go further to May, June, July, oh, Venus is coming closer. This is like a 3D film. So this is how Venus works. You have inferior conjunction, superior conjunction of different planets. Basically the two planets in between. Now I told you, you can't see Venus because it is in between the Earth and the Sun. In the beginning I showed you an eclipse. What about Venus? Does it come in between the Earth and the Sun and cause an eclipse? Of course it does. If I was to show you an eclipse of Venus, the closest one I can remember is 2012, 6th June, around 4:13. Oh, what is this in the background? The Sun. So you see, let me just center the Sun and go back in time for you. Yes. So on 6th June 2012, back when I didn't know much about stellarium, Venus made a beautiful astronomical phenomenon where, as time passed by, I'm fast forwarding time, Venus appeared in front of the Sun and caused an eclipse. But unlike the Moon, it is so small because it's so far that you could just see a small dot passing through the Sun. As a faster time, it just passes away, and that's what it does. Let me just go back again, show it to you again. Yes, so on 6th June around 4 in the morning, I guess, yes. So as I move further, you can see Venus moves, 1 hour jump, 5, 1 hour jump. So you can see the moon is passing, Venus is passing through the Sun. What about Mercury? Mercury did that last year. Unlucky for Indians, it happened after sunset, so we couldn't see it. But Mercury also, let me just go to the time. Mercury made a transition on 11th November around, wait, let me just switch the view. Did you see it? No, let me zoom in. You see Mercury, pay attention. I will fast forward time. 11th November 2019, Mercury made this jump in front of the Sun, where it came in between, and it was a tiny, tiny planet moving across the Sun's disk. From Earth, it's very, very difficult to observe. You need a telescope to observe this. You can see how big the Sun is right now. So the Mercury made a transit or an eclipse as it passed off. These are the two planets between the Earth and the Sun. Mars, again, it's a red planet. Let's look at Mars, bringing it to center. Yes. So Mars, you can see it's a beautiful red planet. On the poles there's some ice because it's away from the sunlight and it's farther from the sun. So Mars is beautiful. It's rotating because time is moving so fast. You can see Phobos here, the moon of Mars, and there's Deimos, another moon of Mars. They also cause eclipse on Mars. So Mars again, if I move further from months, let me just pause time for you. Today night, oh, that's so close because Mars has come close. Basically what happens is these outer planets, because of Earth's elliptical path and their own elliptical path, they appear to come very close and go very far sometimes. So Mars right now, today will look like this because the sun is on one side, darkness on the other. If I go to July next month, Mars will come closer. August, again closer. So you can see how the surface of Mars keeps changing. And again Mars is unlike Venus and Mercury or the moon, Mars will not form a crescent because it's outer planet. So you can see always Mars is well lit, a little bit of shadow on one side or the other. Two moons orbiting Mars, beautiful. I can show you the orbit if you want. Let me just fasten time for you. And yes, there they are. Phobos is a very, very, very fast planet. So this tiny little planet of Mars called Phobos is so notorious that sometimes on the same day it will cause an eclipse 3 or 4 times. And Deimos is a very small planet going around Mars at a farther distance. They also cause eclipse on Mars. But the fascinating planet that we find in the night sky are Jupiter and Saturn. So let me show you Jupiter first. Coming to today, Jupiter is close to Saturn. If I show you Jupiter, if you look at Jupiter from a binocular, you will see small 4 dots like this around Jupiter. They are called Galilean moon. If you look through a telescope, you can see Jupiter clearly and the moons. They will not appear this big because it's a software, it's trying to simulate light. And if I go further, this is how Jupiter looks. So this is Jupiter. These are the 4 Galilean moons: Callisto, Io, Ganymede and Europa. Jupiter has 79 moons. And there are so many moons of Jupiter, there should be an eclipse, right? In fact, we are lucky. On 21st, we have an eclipse of Jupiter. So let me just show it to you. Observe closely. I'll zoom in. Fast forward time. And notice in a while you'll see something on Jupiter. There it is. What do you see? You see a black spot passing. In front of it there's a moon. So that's an eclipse on Jupiter. So Io is passing in front of Jupiter, between the Sun and Jupiter. So you just saw an eclipse on Jupiter. I don't think you can do this like without the software very easily. In fact, there are so many moons, there are times when Jupiter can have multiple eclipses at the same time. You can Google this. There's a Wikipedia page for eclipses on Jupiter where you will find 3 or 4 eclipses occurring on Jupiter at the same time. So on 21st we have an eclipse on Earth. If you are not in Dehradun or Joshimath or some places, you are not going to see the eclipse. In Karnataka, you will see a partial eclipse. Southern states, all southern states, partial eclipse. If you are somewhere in America, you'll miss the eclipse. On Jupiter, it's so cool. Right now, if you're missing an eclipse, go to the nearest place. There might be another eclipse there. So there are times when there are 3 eclipses on Jupiter, 2 eclipses on Jupiter. You can find photos on the internet. Just show you how the orbits occur. I'll fast forward time and you'll notice how the planets orbit Jupiter slowly. I'm fast forwarding time, so you can see almost every second is equal to 2 hours. I can do it further faster. Every millisecond is equal to 1 hour, and you can see the beautiful orbit of Jupiter's moons. This is how it works. You have multiple moons, too small for this field of view to be seen. So let me just pause time. The most beautiful planet in the night sky, the planet Saturn. Saturn has the highest moons. Saturn has 82 moons, known moons, there may be more. Saturn has got a beautiful ring. Eclipses occur on Saturn, not a big thing. There are so many moons, obviously. But what's the beauty of Saturn is this ring. And what I find fascinating about Saturn is tonight, if you take a telescope, as in basically early hours of tomorrow, if you go out, you will find, let's go to 19 June, 20th June, morning 5. Okay, 5:30. Yes. So if you go and look at Saturn tomorrow morning through a telescope, you will see a view like this, very fast. In fact, an interesting fact is the distance between Jupiter and Saturn is close to the distance between Jupiter and the Sun. So it's double the distance from Jupiter. That's why Saturn will appear very small in the telescope. If you have an 8-inch telescope, Saturn will look like this. You can see the rings, differentiate the gaps between the rings. But Stellarium lets you look at the planet. Now the beauty of the planet, which all astronomers look for, is as time passes by, observe the ring of Saturn. You see the shadow of Saturn falling onto the rings. This shadow keeps shifting. So you see, I do this. You see the shadow shifted again. And then again it shifts. That's because the Sun is quite like you right now. You are the Sun to Saturn. But if I jump in years, not just months, if I jump in years, you'll see the ring will disappear. In fact, 2024, if I go to a specific month, let me just get it exactly right, 2025, look at this, look at the beauty of this. In the March of 2025, if you look at Saturn on 22nd March 2025, the plane of the ring is in the line of eyesight. So, just like if you stare at the edge of the paper at the right angle, you will not see the paper. You will see just a line. Saturn's ring on March 22nd, 2025 will disappear. You will see a line on Saturn, that's the rings. And then what happens? Next year, you will see the bottom part of the rings. You see, in 2024, you could see the top part of the rings. Or 2020. Yes, 2020, or tomorrow morning, if you look at Saturn, yes, you can see the top part of the ring. It's clearly visible. If I move 19th June 2021, 2022, 2023, and further, as you go to 2025, you are looking at the bottom of the rings. That's the beauty of Saturn. Because from Earth, Saturn is wobbling. And I can show this to you by fast forwarding time. So jump to today and fast forward. When I jump fast forward time, you will see Saturn's shadow shifting. Saturn is going away from us. If I jump further, you will see the beautiful Saturn orbiting around the Sun and on its own axis, coming close, going far, and doing this. You can see the ring is slowly getting lesser and lesser. 2025 is approaching, and we have March, and the ring has just passed through, and you can see the bottom of the rings. I don't know how People on YouTube are getting this. I hope it's smooth, the transition, but this is how beautiful Saturn is. Uranus and Neptune are too far to be watched with detail, even with a large telescope. I'll skip those two planets. You can go to Stellarium and check it out yourself. Now coming to planets, another beautiful phenomena. Since we are on Saturn, let me just look far from here. I need something for reference, so I will bring on the constellations now. Right now, today, Saturn is in Capricorn. Saturn is in Capricorn. And I'm just gonna fast forward time and notice how the constellations move in the background. Oh, this Saturn is moving, okay. So can I track Saturn? Yes. So Saturn is making a transition to Sagittarius. Okay, I'm moving forward in time. Yes. You notice I had a confusion in the beginning. I'll explain in a while. Now Saturn is moving again to Capricorn. Ignore all the other objects in the sky. Just look at Saturn. He is into Capricorn. Oh wait, he's bored. He's trying to get out of Capricorn again. He's going backward. And again in a while he'll change his mind and he'll move again into Capricorn. So he keeps doing this. So it takes a lot of time for Saturn to get out of a constellation. Right? This you can't see even with a telescope. For this you need a simulation itself to fast forward in time and notice how they go around. Saturn keeps moving forward into Aquarius. No, I want to go to Capricorn. Again in a while I want to go to Aquarius. So he'll stop, he'll turn around and go back. See? In fact, it's just not Saturn that does this. Let me just pause for a while. Let me move on to today. I will locate Jupiter. Jupiter also does this. Jupiter, if I fast forward time, so I'm fast forwarding time. You'll see Jupiter again moves backwards to Sagittarius along with Saturn. And then after a while he changes his mind. He moves forward with Saturn. Oh, he has overtook Saturn. But is he going to cross Capricorn? Oh, he has crossed Capricorn. He's gone into Aquarius. But now he realized he hasn't seen Capricorn, he hasn't spent enough time there. So Jupiter is coming back for Capricorn. So you'll see Jupiter is also doing the same thing. He moves forward, he comes back, he moves forward, he comes back. And unlike Saturn, he's doing it for a longer distance before he turns around because Jupiter is closer to us. So right now you would have got an idea that this is because of the point of view of the Earth. Around the Sun, Jupiter is going in an elliptical path. He is always going forward, never backward. But you notice Earth has a smaller orbit. So at some point, Earth will, if you take it from an angle point of view, Earth will overtake Jupiter. That's when Jupiter will look like he is moving backward, and then again it will shift. So we call this retrograde motion. You can just Google this and find out the physics phenomena. But from astronomical observation point of view, this is how the outer planets look like. Even Mars does this. In fact, we call it a rangoli. You can find something called the pentagram of Mars, where Mars will form a beautiful pentagonal orbit around the Earth from Earth's point of view. So you can find retrograde motion. So this is about the planets. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. You have all these figures. What are these? There's so much. These are the different constellations. Now I told you in the beginning, in India we may be familiar with the term Rashis. So Rashis, when I say, it's basically a region in the sky. But when I say constellation, it has a scientific meaning where I would call it a region in the sky with defined borders for which we have images. So let me just enable the boundaries. You can see red lines, I hope. So you will see every constellation is fixed to a region. I don't know if you can see this, but Spica here is in the Virgo constellation. You see this boundary here, so all the stars that come under this region is called Virgo. Spica, if you want to look at the scientific name, it's called Alpha Virgo. So all stars are named after their constellation. We call this the Bayer naming system, where we name the stars based on their brightness, magnitude, and the Greek alphabet. So the brightest star in any constellation is called the alpha star. Next is beta, gamma, delta, and so on. So you'll see Regulus over here. I'll bring it to center. Regulus is the brightest star of Leo, so we call it Alpha Leo. I don't know if you can see it on the top left corner, but either way. The second most brightest star in Leo, which one is it? Looks like it's Denebola here. Denebola here is the Beta Leo. The next brightest looks like it's this star, yes, Gamma 1 Leo, because there are multiple stars there forming this one star. When far away stars are close by, you will see that they appear as one because of I not being able to resolve them. That's why we'll name them with a number, Gamma 1, Gamma 2. But from here, it's Gamma Leo. Same way, I told about Gemini. Gemini has two bright stars, of which Pollux is the brightest. No, Pollux is the second brightest. This is called Beta Gemini and Castor is called Alpha Gemini. So this is the Bayer system, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and so on. But you will notice inside Gemini, if I zoom in, there are so many stars. How will I name all these stars? Because the Greek alphabet is limited. You have capital and small letter alphabets. To take it as English only, it's 26 alphabets. English has 26. Capital and small letter make it double, 52. What about the 53rd star? What will you name it? So for that matter, you follow the Flamsteed numbering system where you would number a star. So Castor here is called 66 Gemini. Pollux is called 78 Gemini. So each of the star is given a number. Now we have two systems, very confusing. So what do is, we follow the Bayer system for all the stars it applies to, and then stars beyond this system. When we run out of Greek alphabets, we will number them. So this is how the constellations work. In the night sky, you have 88 constellations as designated by the International Astronomical Union. You will see the 12 constellations lie on something called the ecliptic. So you have Aries, these are the zodiac constellations, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and back to Aries. That is why we call this a zodiac. Sun is always in one of these constellations. In fact, the reason I differentiate between Rashi is because according to the Indian system, so we have the Swati Nakshatra. So anyone born on the day when the moon is close to this star here, it's called Swati Nakshatra. And anyone in Swati Nakshatra is assigned the zodiac symbol of Virgo. But you can notice here, this is in a different constellation. Swati is Arcturus, which is located in Boots. This is the Boots constellation. So we assign it to Virgo because ancients didn't have an international astronomical union. They could identify Virgo, and anything between this boundary and this boundary, all the stars that you could assign, were assigned as Virgo. So Swati or Arcturus is actually in Boots. So I would like to say Arcturus or Swati is in Boots constellation, but Virgo Rashi. Same way, there is another beautiful constellation. Yes, Betelgeuse, Ardra. Ardra is assigned as the Gemini constellation. You can see Betel is clearly in Orion. So that's why Betelgeuse would be in Orion constellation and Gemini Rashi. That's where zodiac and astrology and astronomy are different. Each of these constellations are assigned by the IAU, but many of them were actually identified by the Greeks. So they have stories for each of them. Not all 88, but most of them. To give you an example, there are some interesting stories. You will see in the night sky Scorpio here. You can see, let me just remove the constellation image that will help you identify the stars yourself and the boundaries and the ecliptic. Okay. So in the night sky, if you go out, you will form a small question mark shaped constellation like this, starting from here, like this. And then you have 3 stars here. 3 stars and this. So let me enable the lines for you. Yes, so this is Scorpio. Now Scorpio in the Greek mythology is the scorpion created by a goddess when she wanted to punish Orion the hunter for killing all the animals in the jungle. So basically the story goes that Orion wanted to impress a female goddess. So she was impressed by his hunting skills. So he became proud of himself and shot all the animals in the jungle to present to her. But unfortunate for him, she was the god of life and jungle or forests. So immediately she cursed him, and the scorpion came from the ground and bit Orion, and he died. Now for Orion being a great hunter, he was put out in the night sky as Orion constellation. But then again, Scorpion is the one that taught him the lesson, and us, that you don't kill an animal for amusement. You should never kill an animal for amusement like Orion did. So to teach us all a lesson, the Greeks believed that the scorpion was also put in the night sky. But because Orion was killed by the scorpion, let us avoid doing that in the heavens. So you will find if Orion is here, exactly opposite is Scorpio. So these are the stories there are about the constellations. Some of them are linked and some of them are just standalone. And many of the constellations that are identified by Ptolemy have their own stories. Some of the constellations that are recently given out by the IAU and others, recent astronomers, they don't have a story. But this is the celestial sphere for you. Now what about all the stars? Are they all stars? Not really. If you look at Orion here, you will see Orion has a sword on his hip, and the middle star in that sword, if you look through a telescope, looks beautiful like this. This is the Orion Nebula, a region of gas in space that is basically the birthplace of stars. So you have all these gases coming together because of gravity, heating up and forming stars. The Orion Nebula is basically designated as M42 or the Messier 42 object. There are many naming systems for objects in the sky other than stars. So you have the Messier system or the Messier catalog we call it. Orion Nebula is called M42 for that matter. It is also called NGC 1343. So there's another catalog that is called as New General Catalog, in which Orion Nebula is 1343rd object. So it's just a matter of naming them and identifying them. You can follow whatever you want. Okay, so same way. Okay, Orion is fine. Orion is like this. This is the region of forming stars. Another beautiful object in the night sky. You can see there are so many, but these are more beautiful when you look at the Hubble pictures or through a telescope. Another object I would like to show you, I need to find Leo, no, not Leo, Taurus. So how would I identify Taurus? I would look for an A shape in the sky. Here it is, yeah. So you have an A shape in the sky. That's how you find Taurus. And also to confirm this, you have Pleiades, which is nothing but it's a cluster of stars. So these two together form Taurus. In fact, this is the face of the bull. It will extend to the horns. So if I nibble the lines, you can see this is the Taurus. Now here in Taurus, if I just jump into this region, you will find something called the Crab Nebula. Here it is. So Crab Nebula is this. If you look through a telescope, you will see a very faint star. This is another nebula, but unlike Orion, this is not a region where stars are being formed. This is a region where a star has just died. And when I say just, I am not talking about a few minutes ago, few millions, or probably a billion years ago. When a star, as we call it, goes supernova or explodes out, you see a supernova explosion, and this what you see is that explosion. It's like pausing time, because these explosions in the scale of the universe is that's going to last for a few millions of years, unlike your explosions on Earth where it's a bomb blast and it's just few seconds. So over a million of years you can see this. In fact, you can go to our PAC website and find a post on Crab Nebula where we have put up a photo taken by NASA over 10 years. So they've taken a photo every year of this Crab Nebula, which shows that this explosion is expanding still. So it's just like pausing your screen and looking at the explosion. Further, you can also search on Stellarium or locate them. You have beautiful nebulas like the Helix Nebula. So yeah, this is the Helix Nebula. You have something called Eagle Nebula, which is very beautiful. Yes, so this is the Eagle Nebula. You can see this looks like an eagle, but unfortunately on Stellarium the images are not very clear. You can just Google the Hubble images and they're beautiful. This is called the Pillars of Creation. So these are all different objects you can locate in the night sky or the celestial sphere. Other than nebulas, what do you have? In the night sky, maybe in the month of November, you'll see 4 bright stars. We call it the Square of Pegasus. From Pegasus, if you go track the tail, you will see a patch in the sky, and if I just zoom into it, you will find the Andromeda Galaxy. So this is the galaxy located 2 million light years away. So whatever you're seeing, if you go out in the night sky today and see it, that light that you're seeing left the galaxy 2 million light years away. There are multiple galaxies. You can find them on Stellarium, and basically you can locate everything. Once you get used to the software, once you get used to some of the astronomical terms, you can find beautiful constellations, objects, and all that.